Hi folks, welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show, coming to you from New Zealand. This is Tony, and with me on the show we have John Haller. And John was on last week, and we decided we needed to do a part two, and quite a number of people said, can we do part two? So that's basically what we're doing. It's completely sort of distinct from the other one, but there's so much we can cover. So welcome back again, John.
Always good to be with you, Tony. It's a shame we don't have anything to talk about.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're going to scratch our heads, aren't we, trying to find something?
Yeah, well, we'll try to drag this through for a few minutes here.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start, actually. There's so many different things. So I'll let you maybe decide where you want to go. I've got some stuff I can bring in, but we'll see where it leads.
Well, I continue to be concerned about where all of the technology stuff is going with social credit scores, central bank digital currencies, artificial intelligence. I heard Elon Musk, he weighed in on the Israel-Gaza thing and essentially said, well, why don't we just take nice colored balloons over to them and everything will be okay. And so it led me to believe that it's artificial intelligence. It's not real wisdom that we're dealing with on all these things here. But they did do a big AI safety summit in London a couple of weeks ago. And Musk went there and he was interviewed. And he was interviewed by Sunak, the prime minister of the UK. And he said a couple things. First of all, he said this AI stuff is an existential risk to the future of humanity. He also said that he thinks that people will be able to put in off switches so we can shut off the robot when it's trying to kill you. And it was funny that the whole time he was saying this, and by the way, he says, also, we're rolling out our artificial intelligence thing, and it's going to go way beyond anything anybody's seen so far. And you can find it at x.ai, and they have this thing called Grok, Grok. So I never read the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but that's apparently where this comes from. And this is what they're doing. And the whole time it was funny because before I saw that rollout by X of their AI, x.ai, I was thinking when Musk is talking, he looks really concerned. Now, he could be stoned, I don't know, for all I know. But he looked really concerned about what he was talking about. This stuff is really pretty scary. We don't have control of it. Nobody's going to stop it. No government's going to come in because every other government's going to push it forward. So we're never really going to get anything that anybody wants in terms of some kind of safety built into this. And the whole time he's saying this, I'm thinking it looks like he's thinking, okay, when I get done with this interview, I need to call the guys at SpaceX and see how they're doing on my rocket to Mars so I can get out of here. That's exactly what he looked like in that whole interview. Then when Sunak, that was a media interview that he did on the sidelines, but then on stage with Sunak, he said, well, we're going to get to the place where you won't have a job, but you'll have a basic income. You'll have a high basic income, so you'll be able to be satisfied and live. But that's not what the plan is, I don't think. I don't think the plan is to have a lot of drugged out people sitting around getting a basic income so they can get enough gruel to eat.
No.
So it's very concerning. Sam Altman from OpenAI, and Musk was one of the founders of OpenAI, if you remember, and Musk was afraid that it was getting too commercialized. So he left. So Sam Altman and a guy named Brockman are now out there. And Altman came out and said, hey, we're rolling out a new version of our AI, and it's going to wow everybody too. So we're 1 year removed. I remember it was a year ago, early December. I was in a conference room, a ballroom at a hotel in Jerusalem at the Christian Media Summit. And they had a venture capitalist guy named Jonathan Medved, who was talking about all the great things with the Abraham Accords, and this is not going to be $100 billion. It's going to be a trillion or 10 trillion. I can't remember the number he used. But we're also going to do this AI. We're going to make the lame walk. It's going to be fantastic. And then he mentioned this thing. Have you heard about this ChatGPT? And I had not heard of it, I'll be honest with you. It had just rolled out the week before. It was already over 1 million downloads. Now it's, I don't know how many, 300 million or something. I get stuff every day about, here are 20 apps that people have built off of AI that you can use in different things. And I have friends who are using it. A friend of mine built a website to handle some things in business using AI. And now she's rolling it out as a business. So there are things that can be done with it. But I keep going back to the study that Microsoft did. When Microsoft was going to invest $10 billion in OpenAI, they hired all these PhDs. Would you please go look at this and make sure that this will work and that it's going to be a good investment? And what did they do? They came back with a report and they said that the best thing that this AI was good at was deceiving people. And I think with the war, I know we talked a lot about the Israel thing last time, but what we're seeing with that and other things is just this enormous amount of propaganda out there. I mean, you can artificially generated images. I think there was a school, I think it was in New Jersey, and the girls were coming home from school really upset, and the parents kind of figured out what was going on was that they were being hit with artificially generated, computer generated nude pictures of them being circulated among all the guys in school. So then the prosecutors got involved. They're like, well, we're not really sure this is a crime of any kind. We're not sure what we can do. And we don't really want to hurt the boys, that it might impact their future if we discipline them or anything. And it was just kind of this weird response. And I don't know whatever came of it. It kind of disappeared from the news after a couple of days. But I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's out there. And I'm just afraid, we have a big election this year. And what we're going to see in this election is computer generated graphics and information and artificial intelligence generated information that's going to be incredibly deceptive. I don't know what the answer to it is.
Well, John, what I'm looking at, there is so much in the pipeline globally for controlling the internet, policing the internet. Like, for example, you've got the Digital Services Act in Europe, which basically, according to Ursula von der Leyen, president of the EU, which she posted in a tweet, we're bringing our European values into the digital world with strict rules on transparency and accountability. Our Digital Services Act aimed to protect our children, societies and democracies. As of today, very large online platforms must apply the new law. Now, that's just Europe. Now, the Australian government has recently introduced to Parliament a new law proposal to ban officially unapproved content online. Digital companies are expected to adopt a code of conduct that will see them censor speech based on broad, vague and far-reaching directives. So that's Aussie. There's a whole lot more to that, but it's kind of a big concern. And then UNESCO seeks to regulate all internet content, while citing the need for multi-stakeholder regulation on social media. UNESCO's 59-page tome is titled Guidelines for the Governments of Digital Platforms. And according to, this is Technocracy News, the editor there says, this Orwellian doublethink, at its worst promoting free speech that is anti-free speech, the major threat to stability and social cohesion is all about the stability and social cohesion they want to force on the world. Now UNESCO will spawn a feeding frenzy of eager NGOs and government tyrants to promote and defend the globalist narrative. So basically they're using, and it's over 40 pages long, that they're using all of this stuff as an excuse that they'll have to bring in controls and censorship. So we can't have what you're just saying. So therefore, we'll need a digital ID so that everybody can be identified on everything they do. We're going to have to control the narrative so we don't have misinformation and disinformation out there. It's all going to have, and of course, it'll be the government that decides what's misinformation and disinformation, and ultimately, the UN probably. And so that people like you and I, we might say something about, a virus that's just come out and it'll be, bleh, you can't do that because it's not officially government approved. We've already seen how that happened with the last pandemic. You'll have controls over, you can't speak against climate change as a lie or whatever, man-made climate change. Sorry, that's banned free speech. And AI will be what they use to determine what is happening out there on the internet, and the AI will be programmed to say, John Haller, you can't say that, and soon you've got to have your digital ID to be on the internet at all, and so on.
Right.
So I can see what you're saying. That's all great excuses to say this is why we have to bring these controls in.
Right. That's right. I mean, but it is a problem. I mean, it's, I'm just watching, like I said, with the Israel-Hamas thing, it's just the propaganda is just off the charts. But we see it here in the United States too, because we saw these things. And whether you like Trump or not, okay, there's plenty of reasons not to like him. I'll grant everybody that. But what they're doing and the propaganda that comes out, and there are some court cases going on about how people chose the last president that are actually moving along, but it's completely undermines the narrative. And then you have all of those people who protested the selection that took place.
Yeah.
And they just hide everything. And I mean, somebody like Liz Cheney is like, she's like Goebbels, whatever the guy's name was, from the 30s. Yeah. And people ask me, like, do you think that we're like in the 30s? And I'm like, I think we're beyond the 30s, because the 30s was kind of limited to a specific area in the world, and this is worldwide. This is going everywhere. But there is a lot of stuff. I mean, I know the Gates Foundation is involved in a lot of the digital identity rollouts around the world. They have this thing, I think it's called 50 and 5 digital public infrastructure campaign, trying to get 50 countries. They're not going for 50 countries. They're going for 203 or however many countries there are.
So
and they're trying to roll it out for everybody.
For people that don't know about that, I'll just explain that quickly. There's a 50 in 1 campaign is an agenda concocted by a coalition of unelected globalists to accelerate technocratic control through digital ID, CBDCs, and massive data sharing. The United Nations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and partners of the Rockefeller Foundation are launching their 50 in 1 campaign to accelerate the digital ID, digital payments, and data shared rolled out in 50 countries under the umbrella of digital public infrastructure. And they want this in place by 2028. So,
yeah. I mean, and then sort of tied into the digital identity thing is, and by the way, what you said about the Digital Services Act, I was researching that, and they have a provision in there, and they're mainly focused on the big tech companies, Google, Microsoft, X, and Facebook, and that type of thing. But they have a provision in there that if they don't comply, like if we tell you to take something down and you don't do it quickly enough, the fine is 6% of your revenue from that company. And well, this is billions of dollars that we're talking about. So, but also tied into this is kind of the elephant in the room that people, as I research it, I kind of get, well, it's not ready yet. It's not there. And it's not going to be that big a deal. It's only going to be payments. And that's a central bank digital currency. But this Bank of International Settlements, which a lot of people refer to as the central bank for all the central banks in the world, it's located in Basel, Switzerland, and it's got kind of a creepy looking building. But so here's an article. This one place where I follow this a lot is a place called The Sociable. Tim Hinchcliffe does a really good job there. I think the Rare Foundation and some others are all, and Patrick Wood's Technocracy News is very good as well. But they're talking about, this is some quotes from this Augustin Carstens. He's the rather large man. He has a much larger carbon footprint than I do, and that's saying something. So he's talking at this thing and they had a BIS conference just within the last couple weeks. Says securing the future monetary system, cybersecurity for central bank digital currencies. That's what the title of his talk. The financial system is on the cusp of significant change. Central banks know that they have a responsibility not only to keep pace with the digital age, but to lead innovation to ensure that it serves the public good. CBDCs are central to this effort, whether it is in wholesale form as a type of digital central bank reserves or retail form as a digital banknote. It is increasingly clear, at least to me, that these new forms of money will sit at the core of the future financial system. That's Augustin Carstens speaking this month at the Bank of International Settlements conference. And you sort of couple that with what he said last year when he was talking in a conference where he said, I'm sure everybody's seen the clip by now, we need to do this so we can control all transactions. That's essentially what he said. Yeah. And then at the World Government Summit, I think it was just a year ago, Pippa Malmgren, who is a family's been in banking and that type of thing for a long time, and she's a financial consultant. And she said, this is the future. This is where everything is going. And maybe we need a digital Bill of Rights to protect everybody when this goes out. Well, I've been following this. I know you've been following it. Have you seen the new digital Bill of Rights? I mean, in the rollout for this 55 and 50 or whatever it was that the Gates Foundation was doing, did that the list of what they're doing, did it include a digital Bill of Rights to protect the people that are at the low end of this? No, the answer is no, they didn't. So they're going to use this to just shut off people that they don't like what they have to say. And that's very concerning. And with the growth of AI and how quickly that's being rolled out, I think it far exceeds even what people thought. I mean, the computers are getting more and more, they operate more, they do more calculations, they operate faster. There's a computer at Argonne National Laboratories. This is in the Wall Street Journal today. They have a supercomputer called Aurora. And right now it's housed at the Energy Department's Argonne National Laboratory. Aurora is among a new breed of machines known as exascale supercomputers. In a single second, an exascale computer can perform 1 quintillion operations. That's a billion. A one followed by 18 zeros. That's in 1 second. And they said the computer's the size of 2 tennis courts, weighs 600 tons, and is expected to be the world's first supercomputer capable of 2 quintillion operations a second at peak performance.
Wow.
And that's without getting into the quantum computing thing that they're talking about, which is going to go way beyond that. And what happens? I think about this all the time. Like when we talk about the final beast empire and Babylon and all of this stuff and this thing that comes together under the Antichrist, I have no doubt in my mind that there's a heavy tech component to this.
Yeah.
And I think Patrick Wood, I heard talking about it a couple months ago. He said, when the Antichrist does the abomination of desolation, we know that that's kind of a seminal event that Jesus said to look for. When that happens, and we know that the mark of the beast technology isn't rolled out until after that event. But as Patrick said, and others have said, and I've said, because I think it's a smart thing that they're saying, is that when the abomination of desolation takes place, the Antichrist and the false prophet don't get together and say, okay, it would be really nice if we could control everybody. I think we need to do a crowdfund. Could we do like a $200 billion crowdfunding campaign to get the money together so we could figure out some kind of mark of the beast technology? As Patrick says, when that happens, they're not going to have a meeting about it. They're just going to flip the switch, and everything's going to be so. All the infrastructure is going to be in place. So as you see all of these things piling up and combining, that's where I think that's where I have the concern is. It's all going to be ready to go. And I don't know how far it's rolled out before this mark of the beast thing takes place. So I think that mark of the beast thing will be able to be identified, but it's getting difficult. I mean, you hear these stories all the time. People go to the store and they're denied, they can't buy meat because you bought too much meat this month. And when I was in Scotland this last summer, I went to a store, I went to pay with a credit card, and my picture appeared on the screen in front of me, and then somebody had to come over to approve it. I walked out of the store. I thought, I forgot to get a couple bottles of water. So I went back in to get the water. I came up to the screen, and people had used it since me. As I'm walking up to the screen, my picture shows on the screen in front of me. So like I'm in the database for this company. Yeah. I can't remember the name. It's a big store chain. It's like a Walmart in Scotland. Huge stores with everything in them. I'm like, so I'm in the system now. I mean, they know who I am. And everywhere I drove in Scotland, especially on the major throughways, cameras recording speed and who knows what else. Everywhere there were cameras. In towns and villages, there were cameras everywhere. And they love them over there.
So, yeah, and digital ID is definitely a part of it. And I guess so it's interesting here. I've got the European Parliament and member states have just reached an agreement on the introduction of a digital identity. A Dutch MEP, the member of Parliament, I guess, reported on November the 8th in a post to X. I just left the room where we had negotiations about the digital identity, and I have bad news, announced Dutch member of the European Parliament, Bob Roos. So he's saying that Europe's going that way. And in America, US Senators Kristen Sinema, an independent of Arizona, and Cynthia Loomis, a Republican of Wyoming, have introduced Senate Bill 884, also known as the Improving Digital Identity Act of 2023. If passed, it would require all Americans to have a digital ID in order to function in society. So that's that bill. If I go up here to where I've got some rounding with finances, see, there's bills as well. Like in the US, you've got Bill HR 2969, the Financial Technology Protection Act of 2023, which I think is just sitting there. It hasn't, been tabled yet. To establish an independent financial technology working group to combat terrorism and illicit financing and for other purposes. In other words, they use those as excuses so that they will have protections in an act to, if John Heller, you're doing something we don't like, we can shut you down or whatever. And Canada Financial Transactions Reports Analysis Centre, that's FinTrack, is Canada's financial intelligence unit, a government agency created to collect, analyse and disclose financial intelligence on suspected money laundering and terrorist financing activities. And there's stuff going on there with legislation through Parliament. And I know the credit union, somebody sent me a really interesting PDF put out by a credit union where they're trying to get into law to exempt them from some of the stuff that Canada's pushing through. Because you know what happened with the truckers, of course, with the protests and things like that. So this is all prerequisites leading up to them being able to control everything in terms of finances and what you can and can't spend your money on, and having a digital ID and so on. So what you said about all the systems being put into place, man, I'm seeing it all over the world, with these different different bills and acts being passed or tabled anyway.
Yeah, it's really moving quickly. There were also some regulations that I've heard about. I've not been able to run anything down yet, but they're talking about in our country some proposed FCC regulations, Federal Communications Commission regulations, that are supposed to be voted on this week by the commissioners, of which I think they're either three or five. Two are usually, like if the Democrats have the executive branch, there are two Democrats and one Republican. And a Republican guy said what they're talking about rolling out is like comprehensive, complete control of all internet communications of any kind. And they're going to roll in ESG and diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI stuff into all of this. That's supposed to be voted on this week. Now, I've not been able to put my finger on, I've had a bunch of other things going on, but I haven't been able to put my finger on the proposed regulations yet because they haven't really publicized the proposed regulations that much. They're supposed to publicize them, but the way our government does everything, it's just very concerning. And I think the thing that's concerning about it is, look, for the last 5 weeks, we've been distracted by this thing in the Middle East. And for almost 2 years now, we've been distracted by the war in Ukraine and China's threatening Taiwan. And I heard there were Muslim terrorists that slaughtered 800 people in Sudan the other day.
Wow.
And you don't even talk about that. It just sort of like completely misses the radar because we're all distracted with all these other things. So there's many, many things to be concerned about. Maybe we could wrap this up with this one thing. It's this article that I sent you from a publication called Mind Matters. It just came out on November 7th, just last week. A week ago today, I guess. And it's at COSM 23. That's a big singularity convergence technology conference, COSM 23. The title of the article is Futurist Ray Kurzweil Preaches the Gospel of Artificial Intelligence. And Kurzweil's been the guy, when Netanyahu did that little talk with Elon Musk and Max Tegmark and the guy named Brockman from OpenAI. Brockman from OpenAI said, well, the guy who really understands the singularity and where this is all going is Ray Kurzweil. And Musk had never really come out and said whether he was on board with Kurzweil's singularity thinking or not. But he said, yeah, I agree with that. Kurzweil's the guy. So here comes Kurzweil, and he's saying, remember the famous Time cover from a few years ago where it said, we have 2045, the year man becomes immortal, the singularity. Well, now Kurzweil's advanced that to about 2030, and he's saying that in terms of artificial intelligence, it's going to exceed human intelligence by 2029.
Yeah.
And it will be able to be implemented in 2030. Now, Kurzweil says, don't worry about it. We're merging man and machine and computers and everything, but it'll be good for all of us. It'll work out just fine. And I'm not convinced of that because there's a lot of bad people that are going to do this. And so in this article, they talk about this thing. They talk about AI utopia. It's really dystopia. And then they go down and they talk about this thing called the cult of AI. And there's a website, cultoftheai.com. And it says it talks about that this is going to be great. Don't worry about it. And here's sort of their version of prophecy. This is how this is going to work. The great religious narrative of humanity will be framed this way. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth created life, and life created machine, and machine became God. And so that's sort of how they see this. And there really is this religious cult, religious thinking about it. The only thing that I take solace in as a student of Bible prophecy is I believe that, patterns of what happened in the Old Testament with regard to Israel and the world and the flood and pre-flood and all this stuff is a pattern for the end times. And the only thing I really take solace in is that remember Babylon in Genesis, the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. That was God intervened when that happened. So I think that when it gets to a certain point, God will intervene. And the one thing to remember, the pattern I think that was established by the Tower of Babel is God intervened before it was done. And so I pray and hope that he intervenes before this one is done, because this is going to be a very, very strange thing. And as this article goes on in Mind Matters, it talks about we're going to be making God in our own image. And so and people are putting their values and everything into this AI, and it's pretty scary, because I'm pretty sure the people who have the values don't, whatever they don't have my values. No. They don't have Judeo-Christian values, and that's a big concern as to where all this is going.
Well, Ray Kurzweil's scary, I think. I've several years ago posted videos of him talking, just looked like a mad scientist to me, but just with this faraway look in his eyes and talking about spreading computronium throughout the entire universe and basically, making, it all in man's image. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, when you have people like him who are an atheist with seemingly a God complex, and himself, like these people think they're God, and you realize these are the people driving all of this, and Bill Gates and people like that. It is kind of scary, because they're not like you and I. They're not the kind of people that we would rub shoulders with in the supermarket or whatever either, or people that are just and want to just get on with their life and go fishing, or like you play golf or whatever. These are people that have grandiose ideas that are, beyond, I think, anything sensible, and they're godless. So There's no moral compass behind it.
And there's people that have been involved in this AI thing since the beginning that are really, really concerned. I mean, there was a great interview of Jeffrey Hinton, who had worked at Google. He left because he just said this thing's out of control. There is Max Tegmark, who was also involved in the development of artificial intelligence really from the beginning, and he just says this really is an existential threat. And I think in one interview with Lex Fredman, who does a lot of really good long-form interviews, if you have a couple, 3 hours to spare, he asked Tegmark, where do you think this is going? He goes, well, it's all humanity will die. That's, okay, so that's where you think, what's the chance of that? And they've asked Hinton that, and Hinton doesn't give a very comforting answer. And then also that guy, Eliezer Ludkowski, who came out and said, he just was like, I don't know if he wet his pants during the interview, but it certainly looked like he was on the verge of it, because he's so concerned with this is going. And he says, if people don't control this, then we ought to go bomb their facilities. Well, nobody's going to go bomb the facilities. it's not going to be, that's not the way it's going to work. And it's going to be distributed networks. But, I can go out here, there's 20, 30, 50, $100 billion of investment 20 minutes from my house in technology and server farms and chip plants and that sort of thing. And it's like, it's right in my backyard. And it does, I will confess to you, it creeps me out when I go out by there. It's sort of shocking, the number of these buildings and how big they are and redundant. And Amazon, they're doing great. They've got they're finishing up one. They're the two largest trucking warehouses I've ever seen in my life, right next to each other. And so, I'm talking 200 semi bays on each building, on three sides of the buildings, 70 on each side. It's insane. And the scale is so big, it's hard to get your head around it. So look, we know where this all ends. We know that we're not people without hope. And we just pray, I think we should pray that God will intervene and do justice as he deems appropriate, because I don't know that we're going to be able to stop this thing. I sort of lost faith in the election system to do much of any good. We had a pro-abortion constitutional amendment to our state constitution that was put on the ballot last week, a week ago today. And if you voted yes, it becomes part of the Constitution. It got about 56% yes votes across the state. And Ohio's long been sort of a bellwether state for how well the Republicans will do in a presidential election. And my county where I live has long been a bellwether county for Republicans. I think Trump got 60% of the vote in 2016 and 55% a couple years ago. That constitutional amendment, pro-abortion, pro-reproductive rights amendment with really no restrictions, was approved roughly 60% to 40% against in my county. That's a conservative county.
Yeah.
That's not a good bellwether if that's going to translate through, because the Democrats have seen this happen in Virginia with the legislature flipped. And this is the issue that they're pushing. And they're saying Republicans want to control your bodies. They want to control your freedom, that sort of thing. And that's the message is carrying. And the Democrats have said they're going to put an amendment like the Ohio one. They're going to try to get something like that on the ballot in every state for the presidential election. So Trump's tried to back off the abortion issue, by the way, but I don't know that the Democrats were upset when he did that, because it was like, hey, you can't do that. That's our issue. You're not allowed to run and say that, we've gone far enough on abortion restrictions. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be a big issue. And I'm not optimistic as to where it's going to go. We'll fight.
Yeah, I don't think you can trust governments anywhere, John. And the world as a whole is going morally bankrupt. So we're getting what to be expected, and this is why I think our only hope is in Jesus Christ. Really,
right.
Ultimately, if we put our hope anywhere else, it's not going to work. And you're talking about all these things converging and where it's all going. And I'm thinking of the scripture where Jesus said, "Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive." Doesn't say no one would be saved. Sorry, doesn't say no one's spirit will be. But if human, if Jesus didn't come back and intervene, it's going to get to a point where I think the human race would be wiped out, basically.
And I think that that's possible on about a whole bunch of different levels now.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was not. It was like, well, we get this war, we get this nuclear weapons thing, and then all this other stuff. Well, now you combine the artificial intelligence and warfare and what's going on, and it's pretty scary.
And transhumanism, when they merge humans with machines, and Ray Kurzweil, you mentioned, talking about people basically never dying unless you have an accident or something like that, in which case you might still die. But their goal is to make themselves immortal through merging with machines. I mean, it's just crazy. It's insane. But anyway, this is where these people want it to go. So just to close up, John, as Christians, what do we do?
It's really, this is, somebody was asking me that question. Well, you tell us all this stuff that's going to happen. What do we do? So look, I think we're on the verge of major war in a lot of places. And so I think you need to prepare. Now, I think how people prepare, that's kind of an individual decision. But I think you need to consider storing up food. So go to Patriot Supply, that's in the U.S. It's a company. They'll sit down and counsel you as to what to do. And I don't know if the power grid's going to stay up. It seems like there's a lot of people trying to destroy it. So I just think for your own safety and physical protection, you need to do that. I don't know that there aren't riots coming to the United States. We're letting across tens of millions of people that we've not vetted. And the people who are down there observing this say it looks like 80% military age males are coming through, and they're Middle Eastern, they're Haitian, they're South America, Central America, Chinese, Russian, Ukrainian. And it's like there's a lot of people coming here that probably are not going to be up to any good. We have a massive drug problem. So you just really need to, I think you need to get involved with other believers. You need to talk to them about this, about what are you guys doing to prepare. You need to have a personal plan in place and that type of thing. But listen, above all things, you need to understand that this is the way the Bible described the last days would be. And I don't know how long we have. I mean, people say, well, it could be 50 or 100 years. Well, if it's 50 or 100 years, I don't have to worry about it because I'm definitely sure I'm out of here. Even with the Ray Kurzweil intervention, which I don't think I'm going to qualify for. But, Jesus told his disciples, guys, you should consider yourself blessed that you're living at the time that I'm here the first time, because the prophets long to see this. And I think we need to flip that over to us, and we should consider ourselves blessed. And I know it's hard to do when you see everything going around, but consider yourself blessed that God chose us to live at this particular time that the prophets long to see, because this is going to involve eventually the return of the Lord and the setting up of his kingdom, and that'll be good. And there will be justice meted out at that time. All the injustice that you see is going to be taken care of when Jesus returns. And so we have to look forward to that day. And also remind yourself too that in a lot of respects, our lives seem to be fairly normal. We see tremendous turmoil going on around us, but like in our own little individual communities, it's not that I'm not fighting people off when I drive over to the golf course or something like that. So my life is relatively normal, but there's a lot of stress because people feel like it could just all break apart very quickly. And that's something I have no control over that. That's in God's hands. And the best I can do is the best I can do. But I think you need to think it through, prepare, have an escape plan. Like if your family, the communications go down, have a place to meet and make sure everybody knows how to get there. And I think you need to take care of yourselves that way. But look, God's in control. It may not seem like it right now, but he really is. But it's going to be a stressful time as we move forward.
So people need to just basically read their Bibles, I think, too, and get into the Word of God and prayer, and you'll find a lot more peace there than if you're not. So, okay, John, we'll close up here.
By the way, read the Psalms. Read a Psalm or two every day. I mean, I think the Psalms, they really feed your soul a lot, because those are the things that David and the writers of the Psalms were going through. A lot of the things that we're going through now, and I think those are really a good source of comfort.
Very good. And also the Beatitudes too, I think, in the New Testament. Matthew 6, 7, 8, round about there. That's all really helpful as well. So you can understand what's going on and what you need to basically be thinking on and so on. So, John, well, thanks again. That was another interesting discussion. And, I mean, we just scratched the surface of things, really. But people can go and do more research. There's tons of stuff out there. So thank you, John.
Thank you, Tony. God bless you.
Bless you too. Folks, please remember, visit minutetomidnight.com, our website, and subscribe there if you haven't already done so. And remember also that A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations. And I want to say a big thank you to the people that do donate to help us keep this running. And if anyone else wants to help us out through donating, you can do that at our website, and it is always much appreciated. So that's minutetomidnight.com. And the music used, I've written, played and recorded. So God bless, folks, and God willing, we'll be back with another episode in a few days' time.